Hey, this is Russ. I've been asked to talk a little bit more about the cases that I worked on when I was working in San Diego in law enforcement. So I'm going to tell you about my first homicide and autopsy. Now, the first homicide that I actually got to work on was with San Diego Police Department. I was an intern with them there, and although I was working in the crime lab most of the time, I did get a chance to go out on crime scenes whenever there was a homicide, when I wasn't either working in the lab or when I wasn't at school. So being an intern meant go to school in the mornings, work in the afternoons at the crime lab, go back to school in the evenings, go to sleep, wake up, go out to the crime scene. And a lot of these homicides seem to actually happen in the evening hours, but this one was not. My very first one was actually on a Saturday, and I believe it was the afternoon. We get a call to go to a mobile home that was burglarized, but eventually turned into a homicide. So here's what had happened. The man's mobile home was being burglarized. The guy was actually sleeping inside and didn't know this, but then he heard something, and he heard what sounded like someone rifling through his belongings in the other room. So he comes out and sees this black man who was stealing things out of his mobile home. So he runs back and grabs his rifle, and I think it was a .22, and starts firing. So of course the black man decides, okay, got to get out of here, and he starts running out the door. But in the meantime, the gun jams, and the owner says, "Oh, my gun jammed." So the burglar decides, well, if the gun jammed, I could probably grab a couple more things before I run. He goes back and starts grabbing more things. Well, in the meantime, the owner unjams the gun. So what does he do? Starts firing again. So the burglar decides, got to get out of here. So he drops everything, starts running out the door. Okay. And he says to get away, he's going to have to jump this fence. Now, he didn't realize the reason the fence is there is because that protects you from falling 200 feet off of a cliff. So he essentially jumps the fence and falls 200 feet off the cliff. Now you would think that would kill you, but it didn't kill him. Ambulance was called. He gets put in the ambulance, starts bringing him to the hospital. Later on, they pronounce him dead, but he was dead from a gunshot wound. So now the question is, did the owner have the legal right to fire in protection of himself, or was the burglar fleeing and the other guy was still firing at him, which of course becomes no longer a legal way to fire, because the threat is no longer there, and if you continue firing, you could be charged with a homicide. Now, homicide is not just the illegal killing of somebody, it's just the killing of somebody by another person. Okay, what legal or not legal. So we, as the police, had to decide by finding evidence to either prove that this owner of the mobile home was legally able to fire at him, or did he no longer have the threat and continue to fire? Well, we found later that we found in favor of the owner of the mobile home. So good for him. Anyways, the next day, I had to go to the autopsy of this guy, all right? And that was my very first autopsy. Now, many people feel that, the autopsy would be so traumatic for you that, you either make the decision to continue with the program or quit after seeing something like that. But I found that it was very interesting to me. I remember being in the autopsy room by myself. Everyone had left for some reason. They had to do some paperwork or something. And I was just looking at this man. They had already, removed his rib cage and took all the organs out of him. I was just staring down, and I saw the inside of his spine, basically not from his back, but looking down on him and seeing his spine from the inside. So I was like, oh, this is kind of interesting. I wasn't grossed out by it or anything. I thought, yeah, this is actually kind of interesting. I'm surprised I'm actually able to do this. Well, everyone comes back, and I'm happen to mention to the evidence tech who was working the case at the time. I says, wow, we're lucky this wasn't a stinker. And he says, I can't believe you said that. I says, why? A stinker is a decomposing body. Okay. And he says to me, he says, whenever somebody mentions that, the very next case you get will be a stinker. I go, yeah, sure. I don't believe it. He goes, you just wait. Sure enough, his very next case, decomposed body. They found this man's body inside a refrigerator that had been unplugged and left outside in the hot San Diego sun for a couple of weeks. So the neighbors started smelling something and said, something doesn't smell right here. We better call the police. And sure enough, it was a stinker. So the evidence tech felt I should be called because I was the guy that started this. So, but he did happen to remember that I had an exam to take on that Monday morning. And he says, I'm not going to call him. I'm going to let him study and let him take his test. So Monday afternoon, I go to the police department. I'm going to be working in the crime lab. And he says to me, he says, well, he didn't say. He started yelling at me. He says, you. Because of you, guess what I had to work on Sunday? Because right after that autopsy thing, yeah, he gets this case that he has to work on. Anyways, he says, you're coming with me. We're going to the autopsy of this guy. I said, yeah, no problem. Because just the other day I was able to do an autopsy. This should be good. No. Decomposed bodies are not good. It was so bad, I almost quit. I said, man, I don't know if I can do this work. I mean, it wasn't so bad to be able to see this stuff. It's the smell was just unbelievable. And I went back to school the next day, and I was talking to one of the other interns who was working with the latent print division. And I told her, I says, yeah, man, I'm really not sure if I can do this. And she reminded me of something. She says, look, you've gone through what probably is the worst thing that you can possibly go through. You've already done it. If you've gone through that, the other stuff is probably going to be a piece of cake. You're never going to have problems again after that one. And so she encouraged me not to quit, stick with it. And I did. And of course, I finished and everything, and I ended up working down the road with the district attorney's office in San Diego. But, you know, that internship really was important for me. I also interned with Chula Vista Police Department before working full-time for the DA's office. But that is my story of the internship that I took and my first autopsy and first homicides. Hey, let me show you a photo here. I'm going to show you 3 photos. Okay, I'll put you right over here. These are photos that were taken of me when I was at Chula Vista PD. All right. And I remember my supervisor saying to me, he said, we need some publicity photos to put up on our walls. So let's take some photos of you processing the revolver. So I'm processing the revolver for fingerprints, and he took some photos. And those photos sat on the wall of Chula Vista Police Department crime lab so that anyone visiting the crime lab would see what it is people do at a crime lab. Okay. Now, I forgot all about these photos, and years later, I'm talking probably 25 plus years later, the evidence tech who worked at Chula Vista PD and who was helping me learn came out to visit me in the Chicago area, and he brought these photos with him. He says, I decided before I finally retire, I was going to take these photos and bring it back to you. And so he gave me the photos, which I had not seen for so long. And yeah, it's kind of cool to be able to see these photos. Well, okay, look, take a look at those glasses. All right, back then, those glasses were okay. Today, yeah, kind of big. Anyways, I thought I'd share that with you guys. Hey, if you like the video, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and hit the little bell icon so you can see when new videos from me come out. And if you like these things about crime scenes and whatever, let me know in the comments below. We'll talk a little bit more about some others. Unfortunately, I don't have a whole lot of photos I can show you because that stuff becomes evidence. But we can talk about some cases if you're interested. I'll talk to you guys next time.